Hello Asia and hello world. Panahon na naman ng kampanya. It's campaign season in the Philippines once again as the country is scheduled to hold national and local elections on May 12, 2025. The election campaign period for the senatorial and party list aspirants started yesterday, February 11, 2025, while the campaign period for the candidates for the members of the House of Representatives and officials of provincial, city, and municipal governments will start on March 28, 2025. How is the campaign environment in the Philippines shaping up? What issues and concerns challenge the fairness and effectiveness of election campaigning in the country? We'll discuss these and more in this latest episode of ANFREL's new podcast series, The Election Observer. We're live via Facebook, X, LinkedIn, and YouTube. I'm your host, John Antiquera, and with us today to discuss campaigning in the 2025 Philippine elections are ANFREL members from the Philippines. Starting with Attorney Ona Caritos of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, Mr. Angel S. Averia Jr., National Chairperson of the National Citizens Movement for Free Elections or NAMFREL, and Mr. Jude Liao, Executive Director of the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting or PPCRV. Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon po. As I've said earlier, the campaign period officially started just yesterday. But let's backtrack a bit to the pre-campaign period itself. As we've seen almost everywhere, posters, billboards of candidates have lined the streets and highways across the country even before the campaign period started. We've also been exposed to different ads in different medias. While under the law, these are supposedly not considered premature campaigning, as those who file their candidacies are only considered candidates from the first day of the campaign period. How do you think that affects the level playing field among those contesting the elections?
Who wants to go first?
Sige, Ona, ladies first.
Hala ko, okay. Siguro, just quick answer to that question, John. It affects the level playing field because if you're a rich candidate, you can spend all the resources that you want from the time that you file your COC up to the start of the campaign period. So if you're a poor candidate, then you really can't compete with the rich candidates who are putting up billboards, who are placing television commercials, radio commercials left and right to introduce themselves to voters.
Sir Lito?
Oh, yeah, that's the challenge. The Nielsen survey is out na, no? It's been out. I think the estimate is about 10 billion already on the pre-campaign period expenses of politicians, no? So the other, well, aside from it being advantageous to the moneyed politicians, no? Of course, we put a question on the integrity, no, of the campaign, meaning the integrity of even the candidates, no. So if these candidates cannot, follow rules, even if they're not provided for by law, no, because the big question is, it may not be illegal, but is it ethical or moral, no? So that gives us an indication as to the values of the candidates, right? So I think that should give our voters an idea who these candidates are and what they stand for.
How about you, Sir Jude?
Picking up from Sir Lito, these values would most likely be the same values that these politicians will carry when they hold office. And it's very important for us voters and for Filipinos to look at these values early on, not just during the campaign period, not just during the election day itself, but more so even before all these rules, all these um, processes are in place. And just to add, aside from being moneyed, it's also the influence, how much these people are seen, heard, felt, especially those who are currently in position those who are currently in television for whatever reason. These are also things that add to well, the pre-campaign period.
I just have a follow up on that because I remember when the candidates were filing their candidacies, there was like a code of conduct that they signed. I'm not sure what the content of the code of conduct that they signed, but like, would because we're talking about values here as well, no? Is that part of what they signed up for when they filed their certificates of candidacy? Would you know about this?
If I remember correctly, one of the provisions there, one of the lines there in the statement or the pledge that they sign once they file their certificate of
Mm-hmm.
candidacy is they would follow election laws.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, we have a loophole in Philippine election law, which is under RA 9369 or the revised automated election law, wherein we define a candidate as
Mm-hmm.
someone who has filed his or her certificate of candidacy, and this candidate did not die, did not withdraw such certificate, and the campaign period already started. So technically, when you filed your certificate of candidacy last year, October 1 to 8, you're just considered an aspirant. So for this aspirants, they're not supposed to follow yet the expense limit, the
Uh,
airtime limit as provided in our Fair Election Act. So, hindi pa daw, their pledge of allegiance or loyalty or compliance to our Philippine elections law has not yet started,
uh,
technically.
No, jumping off on what you've said earlier, a lot of money has been spent, obviously, no, with these billboards, posters, no. According to a PCIJ report, would-be candidates air TV and radio ads worth more than 4 billion pesos, even before they were filing their candidacies in October 2024. And then in another report, several of these candidates have boosted their posts on Facebook, with Las Piñas Representative Camille Villar spending the most at 13 million pesos from July to December 2024. Again, we just started the campaign period yesterday. So aside from the issue of level playing field, money has been spent practically for what we can consider as campaigning. So, what does this mean, do you think, for campaign finance spending, the donations that these candidates receive, and the disclosure of these things, as well as the compliance in the campaign spending limit that we have?
Unfortunately, John, whatever is spent before the official campaign period is not included in
Mhm.
the
Report.
SOSE report. This is the statement of contributions and expenditures by the candidates and political parties. No, but then again, if we look at it, if candidates are already spending, they are investing for the elections to get elected.
Mhm.
Next question there is, where is the ROI?
Mhm.
Where are they going to recoup their investments, and how will they do it?
Oh, Ona, Sir Jude?
Uh, for me, as mentioned by Sir Lito, it's not included in the report. But if you look at it, it could be it's an industry in itself, especially when it comes to an election season.
Mhm.
Pre-campaign period, reported properly as well. So this also contributes with
I think we're losing Sir Jude because of the internet connection. We'll get back to you
Hey,
again, but
Jude.
Ona, can you?
Let's sing to Jude. Hey, Jude. So just to jump off from what Sir Lito said earlier, we always look at it from a business perspective. If you spend so much for a position,
Yes.
and you uh, establish basically capital expenses, so if you win and you assume office, then you would want that capital to be you recoup the capital, but at the same time you earn income. So that's where corruption mostly comes in after elections. Because for example, if you have supporters who are contractors, of course they're not allowed under our law to give donations or contributions, but politicians and contractors find ways. They're creative to give donations or contributions to the campaign of certain individuals. So it's also a source of corruption if you spend so much pre-campaign period and during the campaign period. It will affect the governance that people get after the election.
Mhm. Sir Jude, I think weren't able to hear parts of what you said earlier because of the internet connection. We'd like to hear from you again on the question.
Oh, there. I think I lost you.
I think we have technical difficulties when it comes to internet connection. No? It's understandable somehow. Um, yes. Do you think it's okay now? Okay, I guess we can go to the next question. No? Now, going to the campaign period itself, during the 2022 elections, ANFREL noted that pervasive issue of vote buying, a widespread deployment of disinformation campaigns, as well as the abuse of state resources, particularly among incumbent government officials seeking public office. On the issue of abuse of state resources, we know there are many forms in which one's public office could be used to the advantage of an incumbent seeking re-election. But I think among the most controversial recently is the implementation of um, the government assistance program like AKAP or the Ayuda sa Kapos ang Kita program, among others, which was exempted from the election ban by COMELEC. In relation to the exemption of this and similar programs, COMELEC also issued a guideline preventing any candidates or politicians from participating in the distribution of these so-called ayudas. No, again, we are in the campaign period now. Do you think there are enough safeguards that would prevent government resources and programs from being misused and abused in election campaigning? And what do you think we could do to prevent such problems to arise? Abuse of state resources.
I can answer first because we've been monitoring abuse of state resources for the past two elections. There are safeguards, Ron. There are safeguards, but because there are several provisions in the Omnibus Election Code that prohibit abuse or the use of state resources for the campaign of the incumbents or those who are seated in power. But there are also instances of abuse which are still not covered by this prohibition. Because we need to remember our neighbors from other Asian countries need to know that our Omnibus Election Code, the main election law in the Philippines, is an old law. It's older than our 1987 Constitution. So if there are instances which are not yet covered by this provision, for example, the use of official government online accounts for campaigning, we've monitored and observed in the last two elections that some candidates are actually using this official government account for their campaign.
Mm,
So there's a need to address that instance because that's not yet covered by the provisions in our omnibus election code.
I see. Sir Jude, would you have an answer to this?
Yes. Well, I think going back to a while ago on the values aspect of things,
Mm-hmm.
we can put all the safeguards that we want at this point, but the values speak louder when it comes to these initiatives and programs as to how the politicians act as well. However, of course, it would be quite difficult to be discerning and to be critical thinking if you're on the receiving end of these initiatives. You get a certain amount, or you get certain ayuda, as we call it in Filipino. So it's a really tough job in terms of forming these values, not just of the politicians but also of the Filipinos as well.
Mm. just to jump off on that point, no, do you think an effective voter education program would also help in informing the public about possible misuse and abuse of state resources in campaigning during the election?
Yeah, definitely it will help, but it's going to be a long-term voters education or values formation program.
Mhm.
Because as I mentioned, one of the big hindrances is the patronage politics that we have, wherein utang na loob plays a big part
Yes.
when it comes to elections.
Mhm.
So it's a long-term process, really, of making people understand and realize that you may be getting something in the short term, but you won't be reaping the benefits in the long term.
Mhm. On the point of voter education, I know NAMFREL has been doing voter education orientation programs. I've seen it several times, no, Sir Lito. Um, how has been the response to that, and how do you think knowledge on abuse of state resources is incorporated in the program to educate the public about issues related to elections?
Well, a recent run of the orientation, we focused on the first time voters. And it was interesting to note that even the first time voters raised issues about vote buying,
Mm,
right, and vote selling and what they can do about it. So, um, the way we explain it to them is they can start again by also by educating their circles of influence, no, starting with their families, their friends, their classmates, and then the community wide, no, so they can do their own share. These young voters, first time voters actually, are thinking of ways on how to address the issue of vote buying,
mhm,
no, of course they also raised a lot of other issues, like, well, even, the campaigns launched by various politicians, both national and local. So it's interesting that these young voters are quite aware already of what is going on around.
mhm,
So we just have to really strengthen, their knowledge and their resolve to address these issues. Okay.
mhm,
We're planning another round, no, because last September we did our training of CSOs, training the trainers so that we can further spread, no, the word. It's interesting to know that a study in Barn, for example, findings is about close to 60% are still unaware of
mhm,
the BARM elections, what the BARM parliamentary structure is, and a lot of things. So we're partnering with various CSOs and organizations, even media. And in BARM, we're partnering also with the organization of imams, to spread the word around. But it was interesting. Because we went through all provinces of BARM, in 8 universities, schools and universities, and really the young voters are quite aware of what's going on.
mhm. That's good to hear, no. As you said, yes, Ona.
That I just want
Yes,
to
please.
answer the question, what could be done to address
Mm,
abusive state resources. Just a few hours ago, I was in an audience with older persons.
mhm,
The oldest person in that group voted in the election, wherein the person who ran in the election was the father of BBM, the president right now in the Philippines, versus the father of the second female president in the Philippines.
mhm,
So it was the 1961 election. And since that election, this group of older persons was in consensus saying that they have not heard of any individual charged with an election offense case of vote buying or vote selling. So the reason behind the pervasiveness of vote buying or vote selling in the Philippines, abuse of state resources, is the lack of accountability.
mm,
So, in reference to your question earlier, what could be done? There's really a need for people to be shown that accountability could be pursued in cases of vote buying and vote selling. That's why we're really hopeful with the Committee on Contrabigay. This is led by Commissioner Ernesto Maceda, and
mhm,
this was we first saw this committee in operation in the 2022 village elections in the Philippines. And that was the first election, Sir Lito, Sir Jude. I don't know with your experience in LENTE, in PPCRV or NAMFREL. The 2023 village election was the first election wherein LENTE saw and LENTE received a lot of reports, a lot of questions coming from candidates themselves,
Mhm.
asking if they could do such and such action because they were afraid that they will be disqualified by
Mhm.
this committee and contrabigay. So what am I saying? Accountability is the way to go
Yes.
to address or temper this problem of vote buying, vote selling, abuse of state resources in the Philippines. And I'm hopeful with this committee of Commissioner Ernest Maceda that people will see that vote buying does not pay, abuse of state resources does not pay, and accountability can be pursued if instances could happen in the upcoming election.
Mhm. That was actually my next question. No, I because
Sorry,
it's
John.
okay, but vote buying is quite pervasive in the Philippines. I think it's a practice that has become part of our own political culture. How unfortunate it is, but it has been part of that culture because I'm from a small community in the Philippines, and I've heard people who have received monetary compensation for the votes that they cast. Sometimes people would get money from everybody else, and then they just go and vote for who they want to vote for. No, and as you've mentioned, COMELEC during the 2023 Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections formed the Committee on Contrabigay, and a few days ago they relaunched the program with LENTE, NAMFREL, and PPCRV supporting the program. No, so actually my next question supposedly is, how do we prevent a practice so pervasive and embedded in the political culture, like vote buying, and also on accountability? An important question there is, how do we hold them accountable for the acts that they're doing?
I think we come up with community-based programs to address these issues because what we're telling the voters is that if they transact,
Mhm.
no, vote buying, vote selling, uh, they lose the right to begin with to
Mhm.
hold the politicians or the officials, elective officials, accountable because the elective official will only tell the voter that yeah, you accepted my money, why are you running after me now, you sold your right already, no. So the best way to avoid that is for the voters to avoid really accepting any form, no, and or any because it's not only money, abuse of state resources is another form, gifts, no, is another form, assistance is another form. So there are many forms of consideration for when one engages in vote buying. So we tell the citizens not to accept them because in the end you will not be able to hold the elective official accountable for his actions or lack of, if for not meeting, for example, his campaign promises.
Yes. Mhm. Sir George?
For us, one thing that we've seen is vote buying should also be framed properly in the for citizens, in the sense that, as Sir Lito mentioned, there are many forms of vote buying, but for the ordinary Filipino, it's not vote buying.
Mhm.
It's help, it's ayuda, it's it's out of the goodness of the heart of the person, and I will repay that person because he's very supportive, he or she is very supportive, they put up the center, they give scholarships, they helped me when I was in need. And for them, again, it's not in exchange direct, it's not a direct exchange for the vote, it's really uh, a, a support mechanism for them, and that's where the utang na loob comes to play, the patronage politics, and um, the idea of having to repay that kindness that I received.
Mhm.
But on the other end as well, um, it's also trying to fight fear with fear,
Yes.
because many people accept or vote for these politicians who buy votes. Say, for example, they really pay for the votes because they're afraid of the backlash.
Mm.
That if they don't vote for that person, if the person loses, not even the individual vote I'll be casting, the communal vote will be casting. If that politician loses in that specific area and that specific precinct,
Mhm,
what could that person do to our community?
mhm,
Hence, it becomes a communal effort, really, of trying to make everyone understand that there's power in coming together and really realizing that we don't have to be beholden. We don't have to be individually beholden. We can come together and do something about it as well.
mhm. Speaking of doing something about it, no. I guess for the information of our viewers, would you know how people could report instances of vote buying if they see it? Where do you think they should go? How should they file? And I guess there's also some fear of being tagged. Well, if I report this, maybe I will be the target of this politician. How can they be protected if they see something and report incidents of vote buying?
Actually, if Attorney Ona and Sir Lito would remember, when Contra Bigay came up, the two main issues were protection and safety of the people who will report, and the support that these people will need, because it's not simply sending a photo and that's it. There's a process that they have to follow, and for that, one organization that could really help would be Lente, with their expertise in legal, as in the legal aspect, and the network that they have as well.
Mm-hmm. So,
Thank
Ona,
you, Jude, for the word of thank you, Jude, for that word of endorsement. But John, can I continue with my sharing of stories?
of course, yes.
Just to jump off from my accountability answer early, Lente has been pushing for accountability in elections since 2010, and we've received thousands of reports about vote buying, vote selling, and just like what Lito and Jude mentioned earlier, when we call up these people, those who submitted this report, the
Mm-hmm.
number one question that they would ask us is, we so already submitted our report. Can you be the one not to complain and not us? Because one, they're afraid. Second,
Yes.
they don't have time for long cases, for the
Mm-hmm.
case to go on long litigation. So we're really happy with CKD. We're not kissing the ass of Commissioner Maceda, but we're really happy with CKD because for the first time in Philippine elections, COMELEC established presumptions on vote buying and vote selling because it's really hard to prove vote buying. Because, for example, individual A was accosted for giving money to his or her neighbor. This person would just say the excuse, this neighbor, I owe this neighbor something, a loan. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
just paying back that loan to that neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
To excuse himself from the offense of vote buying. But with presumptions established by the Committee on Contrabigay to fight on vote buying and vote selling, excuses like that, you need to show further or to defend yourself that you really have a loan with your neighbor and you're not just using it as a defense. For example, when you have more than two poll watchers in a polling place,
Yes.
that's a presumed act of vote buying. Because in the Philippines, what candidates do is to appoint hundreds of watchers in a barangay. So we call it legal vote buying. But
Mm-hmm.
now, under the CKB, it's a presumption that you're committing vote buying if you have more than two watchers per polling station. So those are the helpful presumptions that the CKD has established to make the fight against vote buying, vote selling, and abuse of state resources more realistic
Mm-hmm.
and for prosecution to happen. Also, another another act that COMELEC will do, that the CKD would do to prevent vote buying, vote selling, abuse of state resources. For example, Ayuda ban.
Mm-hmm.
10 days before election day, or May 2, or May 12 is the election day in the Philippines, there's a total prohibition against the giving of MAIT or social welfare program.
Mm-hmm.
So CKB did that. Absolutely prohibit the giving of social welfare programs 10 days before the election. We also have a money ban. 2 days before election, people are not allowed. 2 days, I think, if I'm correct in remembering that provision. You're not allowed to bring 500,000 worth of pesos
Mm-hmm.
if you're not engaged in business or money exchange. So you need to prove that you're engaged in business to show or to be not presumed that you engage in vote buying or vote selling. So COMELEC has done some acts to make it to make prosecution of vote buying, vote selling more realistic and better, and hopefully more stronger in the upcoming May national and local elections.
That's good, no? My second to the last question is on disinformation campaigns. It remains a pressing issue during elections. And with artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, there is a potential increase in the disruption of information integrity during elections. As we've seen during the 2024 super election year, where AI has been used for various purposes during elections, both for the good and the bad. I think as a response, COMELEC issued a resolution that mandated the disclosure of the use of AI in campaign materials with particular penalties for those who spread disinformation and fail to disclose AI tech use. And also it created a Task Force Katotohanan, Katapatan at Katarungan. To translate it, Task Force Truth, Honesty, and Justice. I hope I got that right. We also have to note that there are also other initiatives. There are a number of independent efforts from various stakeholders to address disinformation during elections, like fact-checking initiatives and media information literacy programs. No, so a question is, how do you think disinformation could impact the elections, even with these interventions? And are they sufficient? And what do you think could be further done? Disinformation, AI.
Well, earlier on, no, about almost a year ago, about 10 months ago, we conducted a roundtable discussion on the use of AI for campaigns and electoral exercises, where we proposed to the COMELEC a set of guidelines, no, among which, of course, the set of guidelines, we're saying that the materials to be produced should be factual, should be accurate, should consider safety and security of individuals, and of course, focus on transparency and truthfulness. And I think that is the underlying, uh, those are the underlying principles when the COMELEC came out with the Task Force KKK. Okay. Um, of course, truthfulness, for example, politicians are not or candidates are now required not to use filtered photos, for example, no, to meet the requirements of truthfulness. I hope they do. But how do we prevent misinformation, disinformation? Um, there are, aside from candidates, of course, there are other supporters. There are uh, other parties who may come up with misinformation and disinformation for or against particular candidates that they support or not, right? And that's the bigger challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there is malign influence coming external sources,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the challenge. So we have to be watchful of those misinformation and disinformation and malign influence, and we have to step up in fact checking. So we've partnered with social media platforms, for example, so that they can um uh, address these issues as well. No?
Mm-hmm. So, Jude, Ona, I think you're muted. Yes.
Sorry, being a tita, being an auntie, I muted myself and I forgot to unmute myself.
It's okay.
So just to answer, let me go ahead with. So there's no definite study yet on how disinformation affects elections, especially the results. But we are sure that disinformation changes the narrative. It
Mm-hmm.
changes how people, how the behavior of people, how they interact with each other, especially with other voters during the campaign period. That we are sure of. And we know that disinformation is a big problem, especially in Philippine elections, because we are patient zero in the use of online media to influence the narrative in elections. But as my favorite weatherman in the Philippines would always say, knowledge is power. It's very important for civil society groups like PPCRV, NAMFREL, LENTE to include in their public education activities how to spot disinformation. It's really simple. For example, TikTok, it's an emerging platform in the Philippines. It's really easy to report disinformation content in the TikTok platform. You just press and hold the video for 2 seconds. Then the prompt on how to report such video if it's disinformation would pop up or would rise. So it's really important for people to get to know how easy it is to report disinformation in the different online platforms because we need to start with that basic information
Mhm.
because it's really it's hard to understand the technicalities of the different online platforms. So for the general public, it's important for groups like us to just teach them how to spot disinformation. And if they spot disinformation, how to report such disinformation to these different online platforms.
That's good.
I agree with Attorney Ona, because many Filipino, well, many people, not just Filipinos, and I'm guilty of this as well, sometimes think, somebody else will do that, somebody else will report, somebody else will take that down.
Yes.
But as what Attorney Ona said, it's actually been made easier to report these posts, especially when it comes from, as Sir Lito mentioned, unregulated accounts, those from supporters, dummy accounts even. So we need more people to go on social media, to consume this media and report.
Mhm.
So it's like a community based fact checking, really, because of course the more people who report would in a way also translate. However, we also have to be wary of the other side of things, wherein politicians also use that reporting tool to
Yes.
take down real information when they mass report um, posts or mass report certain things from the other camp. And of course these platforms could also flag it and say, oh, there's something up with this, right? So it's a really a balance of those two. And the last I wanted to mention is the innate power of our young people, since they are very much native in this environment of the digital world. We must find ways to harness that expertise that our young people have when it comes to social media and the digital landscape. Even if I'm young, I'm not really into that world. I'm not as immersed as younger people.
Mhm.
So we have to find ways and make ways and opportunities where younger people can involve themselves in this process, not just in the formal aspect of the elections or democracy, but also in the social media and digital world that we live in.
Mhm. Um, I guess just a follow up, no? Because the Task Force KKK supposedly can receive reports as well. Because part of the COMELEC resolution is for the candidates to register their official social media pages. And you have thousands of candidates, which for me, I'm assuming is really hard to monitor each and every one of these. If I were COMELEC, that would be a very huge task. And the reporting of possible violations could play a huge role in this, no? So how could people report to COMELEC, to Task Force KKK, incidents of possible spread of disinformation during elections?
Actually,
I
that
think
was
from
one of
what
the
I know,
issues.
they could just send in the report.
Sir
Yeah, go
Lito,
ahead,
Sorry, Sir
Donna.
Lito, go ahead.
Go ahead, Donna.
Sir Lito, please go
Yeah,
ahead
no,
first.
sir, just want to answer the platforms. Because
Oh,
from what, sorry, my internet is bad also.
Yeah, well, sige, I'll go ahead with it. That was one of the issues that we discussed with the COMELEC. No,
uh,
it would be a challenge. The reporting, no, would be a challenge considering. Um, well, you can lay out a presumption that once these candidates or political parties register their social media pages in in various platforms, then you can presume regularity,
mm,
right? Precisely because they're registered, so they won't use those platform or those pages to spread misinformation and disinformation. The danger is with the other sources of this misinformation and disinformation. And the challenge to COMELEC is receiving reports from other parties about possible misinformation and disinformation. And it's particularly challenging to the COMELEC because this requires a new set of skills.
Mhm.
No, so the COMELEC really needs all the assistance that they can get from other parties, fact checking parties. No, and we have several in the country. No, who possess the expertise in doing fact checking. So I think a strong partnership will have to be built between the COMELEC and the fact-checking organizations here,
Mhm.
right? Kasi nga, it's because the COMELEC does not have the set of skills to do it,
Mhm.
right? They might have a few of them, but it's going to be a big task really to monitor misinformation and disinformation and ensuring that they are properly fact-checked or
Mhm.
at least flagged.
Mhm. Ona, we can go to you now. You are muted, I can see. Now I think, hello.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Tito, for overlapping with you earlier. Okay, now I am muted. Can you hear me
I
now?
can, we
Am
can
I
hear you, but
audible?
yes, we can hear you now. I think this is the challenge of a live online podcast, no? You will have
especially in
problems.
the Philippines.
Yes, you will have problems with internet connection. Currently, your frame is frozen, Ona. Hello. Can you hear us?
Especially in Barm.
Oh no.
Especially in
we were
Barm.
yes, we were just there. The signal was either unstable or absent.
Uh-huh. But Filipinos are very much connected even with the problem with internet, no?
Yes, and well, what we saw was a proliferation of Starlink,
Mhm.
no piso Wi-Fi.
Uh,
In particularly in Tawi-Tawi. So
uh-huh.
there's a proliferation. So people there are quite used now to the satellite
Mhm.
internet.
Okay.
Anyway, Ona is back.
Ana, hello. Can you hear us? You're back. I think Ona.
Really good. Am I back? Am I audible?
You're audible, but you're
Hello?
yes. Yeah. We can hear you now, Ana.
Okay. I think just to give a quick answer before my internet fails me again. We've been advocating for COMELEC to have its own social media unit, just like other election management bodies all over Asia.
Mhm.
Because we know that it's important for them to have partnerships with the different online media platforms, with fact-checking groups, but it is also imperative on their part that they have their own capacity, they have their own skill set, that they can rely on their own personnel
Mhm.
for monitoring the the information in the online spaces.
Mhm. Okay, I think that's also important, no? Um, Thank you again for answering our questions, but still have one final question to ask, and this is something that we have asked you when we sent out the invite. I hope you participate in it, no? In the spirit of the commencement of election campaign period, campaign jingles have been part of the campaign tactics during elections. When done right, they have the power to embed the name of the candidates in the consciousness of voters. So for our final question, and we request that you participate in it. Now, if you can compose a campaign jingle that would encourage people to vote wisely, what would the title be and why? That's the first part. The second part is because I believe Filipinos are great singers. If you can, please sing some lines from the campaign jingle that you will compose. Who wants to go first? I will participate in this, don't worry. Who wants to go first?
I did not prepare for this question
Wow.
actually.
Oo nga eh. Uh,
Sir Jude, I earlier you said you're prepared for this question. If you have a campaign jingle, what would the title be? And if you can sing lines from that jingle, please do so.
Actually, for PPCRV in 2022, we did have a jingle, an anthem actually, that we used for our voters' education. It's called Maka Pilipinas. So to be for the Philippines, Maka Pilipinas. But my internet's failing me, so I think that's the only thing I'll be able to say.
No, the internet connection is quite good right now. So
Right. I froze for a while. But yeah, so we had this anthem called Maka Pilipinas
Mhm,
that described the 16 values that we want our leaders to have.
mhm,
Um, I can't sing it now, but I can share the link with everyone. It basically speaks of the 16 values that are very close to Filipinos based on the preamble of our constitution.
mhm,
So it was a Tagalog rap kind of song that many of our PPCRV volunteers used to rally volunteers in 2022.
mhm,
We've carried it on for 2025, but I think the newer campaign jingle, if I were to make one, because that's not original, of course, I didn't make that, and that's already existing. We did release an ad recently called Baha for Breakfast. So
mhm,
it's a play in it pertains to how flooding is very pervasive in the Philippines now. And then that ad ends with the line, "Nasa boto mo ang ating pag-ahon." And if I were to create a campaign jingle, I would center it around that imagery of pag-ahon, of
mhm.
um anong English ng pag-ahon? Uh,
Surfacing.
Right.
to rise above.
Rise,
Yeah, to
yeah.
rise above. To to rise above, to something along those lines. So it's a really nice play, and in a way also playing into the feelings of Filipinos, wherein we've experienced so many flooding. More recently, down south in Palawan, flooding has been happening for days already. So hopefully that plays into the minds and hearts of Filipinos, that their vote is not just a vote that they cast, but a vote that can help us rise above all these challenges as well.
That's nice. Sir Lito and Ona.
I'll go ahead. So Sir Lito will answer last. So my song is simple, John, Jude, Sir Lito. It's a simple song. It's defying gravity, but I change it to defying both bodies.
Mhm.
You want me to sing it, John?
Why not?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, please go
I
ahead.
think my colleagues at Lente, my colleagues at Lente will be disown me and they will
Mhm.
not associate with me after I sing the song. But I will sing it because I love to sing, even though my voice doesn't like singing, maybe. So, uh, I'm looking for the line. So, do you really want me to sing it?
Yes, of
Defying
course.
vote buying. I don't
Yes.
have any.
Or
Really, John, you want me to sing Defying Vote Buying in the tune of Defying Gravity?
I will tell you that I will sing. So if you want to sing,
Really?
yes.
This is so pilit. I don't know if what's pilit in English, John?
Forced.
Okay. Um, I don't like to sing because
It's
my
okay.
colleagues at Lente will disown me. But I will say the line. Tell them
Sure.
how I'm defying vote buying. I'm flying high, defying vote buying. And soon I'll match them in Reno. So that's it. That's so pilit.
Oh, wicked, no? Sir
Yes.
Lito. Thank you, Ana, no? Sir Lito. What is your campaign jingle title? And if you have lines from that jingle, you can also sing it.
Honestly, I don't have anything in mind. I just because I just came from a tour of Barm. We were quite busy in our program, but the messages that we have been delivering to the young voters was for them to really participate in this exercise, the
Mm,
election exercise, because in their hands they have the power to chart their future,
mm.
no, with a vote, no, and of course collectively with their votes they have that power to chart their future. They have the power uh, to influence their officials, the local elective officials.
Yeah.
So in that way, uh, by encouraging them to participate and uh, be included in the exercise, they will build upon their future.
Okay. Actually, I prepared for this one last night. No,
Wow.
as
Nice.
as I said, I will be doing a rap with props. So here it goes. No, this is in Tagalog. So I'm sorry to the others who will not be able to understand. But just for the sake of being participatory in it. No, huwag
Rapper.
magpabola sinasabi nila, maging mapanurit kilatisin sila. Tignan track record, tignan plataforma, boto'y mahalaga, huwag umasa sa iba. Maglilingkod sa bayan, di sa iilan,
Yes,
tapat, di ko rapat, yak, na maaasahan. Ikauulan ng bayan, sa iyo
yes,
nakalaan, bumoto na, tama ikipag-asa ng bayan, break it down.
Yo,
yes. Break
Yo!
it down, yes.
nice.
Forgive me for I love singing. So this question really was intentional to to incorporate that in
Showcase.
this episode, no. Muli, maraming salamat po. Thank you, Attorney Ona, Sir Lito, and Sir Jude for joining us today. I hope you don't regret joining us and you'll join us again the next time we send an invite. And I hope you enjoyed the performance.
Quite
Okay.
entertaining.
Salamat po. I will have to take you off the feeds to close the program. Thank you po ulit.
Okay, thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that has been the Election Observer episode on campaigning in the 2025 Philippine elections. Join us again next time for new episodes of the Election Observer. I'm your host, John Antiquera. Have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.